And we thought we would take advantage of this post-Thanksgiving period during this holiday weekend and take a bit of a holiday ourselves from the drumbeat, not the one in our theme song, more like the drubbing of news that we cover here each night. We are now midway through the president's term and nearing what could be a critical point in the Russia investigation as this existential crisis in the Trump administration now truly does threaten the existence of the Trump presidency. Robert Mueller has spent the last 18 months trying to establish any links between the Trump campaign and Russia's interference in our presidential election. Useful to remember and note, 32 people have been charged. 4 ex-Trump aides have pleaded guilty. 1 has been convicted. And after this week, when his daughter's emails have been in the news, remember how candidate Trump handled Hillary Clinton's emails.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press. Let's see if that happens. That'll be next.
At the time, that answer, which was, by the way, to a question from our own Katie Tur, seemed like one of those things he said. If only we'd known then that over a year and a half later, Mueller would indict 13 Russians for election hacking with the purpose of aiding the Trump campaign at the expense of the Clinton campaign. That indictment also revealed that on the day Donald Trump made that comment, Russians were making their first known effort to break into the servers used by Clinton's office.
The defendants allegedly conducted what they called information warfare against the United States, with the stated goal of spreading distrust towards the candidates and the political system in general.
The special counsel followed that indictment with another in July, accusing 12 Russian intelligence officers in the hacking of the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton presidential campaign. 3 days after that indictment, Trump meets with President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. We had no idea yet that Trump would emerge with Putin at his side, with the whole world watching, and say he believed Putin when the veteran spy forcefully denied the Russians had anything to do with our election. His performance gave the phrase benefit of the doubt a whole new meaning.
People came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia.
Is Putin lying to you?
I don't want to get into whether or not he's lying.
Except for the fact that Putin was standing right there next to him, what Trump said that day was pretty much in line with what he had said before about the Russians mucking up our election.
Russia is fake news. This is fake news put out by the media. This Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election. I believe that President Putin really feels, and he feels strongly, that he did not meddle in our election.
While the question of whether the Trump campaign actually did coordinate with the Russians has yet to be answered definitively, as you know, the president has said once or twice there was no collusion. We do know that on June 9, 2016, Donald Trump Jr. met with those Russians at Trump Tower, including a lawyer with ties to the Kremlin, who he apparently believed would have damaging information on Hillary Clinton. After reports of that meeting started surfacing, July 2017, Don Jr. issued an initial statement saying it was all about Russian adoption, a statement his father reportedly signed off on. After a barrage of questions about the meeting, Trump came to the defense of his eldest son.
My son is a wonderful young man. He took a meeting with a Russian lawyer, not a government lawyer, but a Russian lawyer. It was a short meeting. It was a meeting that went very, very quickly, very fast.
Just days after that, we would learn the statement about adoption had actually been dictated by his father, the president, and it was a cover story. And this summer, a full year later, we learned from Trump himself that the meeting was all about getting dirt on Clinton. To quote the president, This was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal and done all the time in politics, and it went nowhere. Had we known that fact, it would have cast a whole new light on the Russia matter, and evidence of Donald Trump's involvement in concealing his campaign's effort to work with Russia may have presented itself. Let's bring in our panel tonight. Phil Rucker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House bureau chief for The Washington Post. Tamara Keith, White House correspondent for NPR. Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee. And Eugene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post. Good evening. Welcome to you all. Phil Rucker, we all witnessed then-candidate Donald Trump's closing argument in the campaign that the election of Hillary Clinton would leave us as a country kind of enshrouded in investigations and scandal and controversy. How do we get from that, the campaign closing argument, to that scene with Trump and Putin in Helsinki?
Well, we have exactly what Trump predicted would happen to the country, only with a different president, because his presidency has become basically covered in scandal. There's a new one at every turn. You now have a special counsel investigating the Russia situation, and it's not only investigating Russia's ties with the Trump campaign, with Trump associates, any efforts at what the president says didn't happen, which is collusion, but you also have the investigation into the president's moves to obstruct justice, his dictating that statement aboard Air Force One that was a false statement, a lie, issued under the name of his son, and other efforts. We learned earlier this week about the president, trying to get the Justice Department to prosecute Hillary Clinton and former FBI Director Jim Comey, two political opponents, perceived enemies of President Trump.
And Tamara, Phil raises a good point. The tumult has largely come from the inside. Things like an effort heretofore unseen in the American presidency to go after a Hillary Clinton and a Comey after being elected president. How do they wall off, and how do they treat the subcategory of obstruction?
Well, the White House doesn't want to deal with obstruction. I mean, President Trump has said that as he responded to written questions from the Mueller team, he didn't want to go into that. He only wanted to deal with questions about Russia, not questions about obstruction. Now, whether those things can actually be walled off, I mean, that's really not up to the president to decide.
Michael Steele, as a former party chairman, how do you deal with the knowledge that some Republican names, Manafort, Gates, Flynn, have flipped and are now working for the feds?
Well, it speaks to the broader problem that the president has, and the party label and all of that is not a protection. I mean, just because these guys are inside the tent, self-preservation kicks in after a while, and we see that. And so for the party now, you've got, some leading figures, some past figures in the party who've gotten wrapped up in this world, and which really speaks to, Brian, the silence that you hear from the current Republican leadership, from the National Party to the legislative leadership on the Hill, the House and the Senate, trying to stave off as much of the noise as possible, look past some things, ignore some other things. And as we see now with the latest revelations about emails, eerily quiet, not parroting back the, lock her up mantra, because it now applies to the first daughter as well.
Okay, Eugene, you're the second of our Pulitzer Prize recipients on this panel, and you're the columnist. You are the thinker of deep thoughts for a living. Having said that, having established that, what is your view of what the Mueller investigation et al. Has done to Washington, D.C.?
Look, we haven't had anything like the Mueller investigation really since Watergate. I think you have to go back that far to find an investigation so wide-ranging with so much potential for destroying a presidency, and so many revelations coming out of things that were kind of unimaginable. I mean, if we had known known back then everything we know now, we would have been aware that we were, as a nation, were taking a leap into the unknown in ways that even knowing that Donald Trump was, to say the least, an unconventional presidential candidate, that we hadn't seen anything quite like him before, I don't think anyone really imagined how far into the outer limits we would go.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.